Bold predictions, chapter 23. Can you believe we've made it this far? These are the things that you have claimed. And then you followed it up with, and I would bet my money on it if you made me. Let's dive into bold predictions, chapter 23 tonight. How about conference championship matchups? Man of Hate hit us up. Not a single Power 5 conference championship game will be a repeat of last year's matchup. Much love from a fellow Fountain City native. That's Columbus, Georgia, to the layperson out there. I made this a 7 on the boldness scale. Now, here's a quick recap. If you're listening on podcast, you need to listen here. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see. Last year's conference title rematches. Pitt versus Wake Forest. To give you an idea, preseason odds this year. Pitt is the second odds-on favorite in their division. Wake Forest is third. So neither of them are favored to get the conference title game. Next up in the Big 12, Baylor versus Oklahoma State. Baylor has the fourth best odds in the Big 12. Oklahoma State has the third best odds. So probably going to see a different matchup there. We move on. What about Michigan versus Iowa? In the Big 10, Michigan has the second best odds in their division, behind Ohio State, obviously, and Iowa has the third best odds. In the Pac-12, Utah versus Oregon. They have the second and third best odds to win the conference, and it's all kind of neck and neck up there. Anyway, you hear what I'm telling you so far. We don't have a 1 versus 1 matchup here. In fact, none of these teams so far are favored to make it back to their conference title games. Then you get to Bama, Georgia, and they are the overwhelming favorites in the SEC to both make it to the championship game in their respective divisions. So the prediction here is we won't have a single rematch in conference title games. The first 4 I read you, it's easy to see. I mean, I could easily see a world where neither Pitt nor Wake Forest even make the ACC title game. Ditto in the Big 12 of Baylor, Oklahoma State. The SEC is what's in your way here. Because obviously, you're looking at the odds. If you're listening on podcast, Georgia is a plus 120 favorite to win the East. Kentucky is plus 4,000. That's how overwhelming the odds are for Georgia. Bama's minus 140 to win the West. A&M is plus 1,600. That's to win the SEC championship, but it's giving you an idea of how wide the gap is between the teams. I made this a 7. I think it's bold to say you won't have a single rematch. It's just because of the SEC. Because outside of that, this wouldn't be bold at all. The SEC is what potentially could get in your way there. Next up, this was a fun one here. Close your eyes in Austin. Kyle said at the end of the year, there will be 3 teams, count them, 3 teams from the state of Texas ranked higher than the Longhorns, checking in from San Antonio, Texas. So Stats and Info, or as you may know him, producer Jesse, he said we got 7 candidates here, really. So with all due respect to Rice, food is not going to enter into this equation. We got Houston, A&M, Baylor, TCU, SMU, Texas Tech, and UTSA. Those reasonably could be there. But here's what you really need to know. For 3 teams in this state to finish higher than Texas, we're probably looking at Houston, A&M, UTSA, and Baylor. We're probably choosing from them. Houston's over-under win total is 9. A&M's is 8.5. UTSA is 8.5. And by comparison, Texas is 9. So there are 3 other teams in Texas that have an over-under win total of at least 8. In fact, Baylor, UTSA, A&M, and Houston, so there are 4 of them, aside from Texas, that have over-under win totals of at least 8. This all falls on Quinn Ewers, though, doesn't it? Because it really doesn't matter what UTSA does, all due respect. If Texas is taking care of business, if they're winning 9 or 10 games, they're ranked higher than UTSA. And so that all falls on Quinn Ewers. And if he plays even remotely up to what you think potential is and what you think capability is, so many of those other pieces fall in place. Think about what Isaiah Nair is. You know, the Wyoming wide receiver transfer. What is he if Quinn Ewers pans out? All that stuff falls into place. Xavier Worthy could be an All-American in his sophomore campaign if Quinn Ewers pans out. You know, I get kind of quiet there because that's the million-dollar question, or in his case, multi-million-dollar question in Austin. I can see 1 or maybe even 2 of these teams finishing higher ranked than Texas. Short of like an injury situation, which we don't predict on the show, I don't see 3 of them doing it. So I made this an 8. I've got some confidence in Texas this year like I didn't necessarily have last year. I'm not telling you they're winning the Big 12. I just need them to be ranked higher than Baylor or Texas Tech or TCU or something like that. So I'm going to call it an 8. I think it's a little too bold for my taste. Let's go over to the SEC East for a second. How about this one? This one's pretty bold. South Carolina going to go 2-2 against these 4 teams. At Arkansas, home versus Georgia, home versus A&M, at Clemson. South Carolina's defense also takes a huge leap under second-year coordinator Clayton White. So all due respect to Coach White there, I'm mainly going to focus on the predicted records here. This one's an 8. This is tough to see. Not impossible, tough to see, though. This is why I keep warning about properly gauging progress under Shane Beamer year 2 at South Carolina. Look, there is certainly a world where they pull a couple of big-time upsets. In fact, if there were a program out there that were going to be a candidate to do that this year, I'd probably look at South Carolina. I mean, they had a really good portal class, highlighted by Spencer Rattler, obviously. That year 2 magic that sometimes we see. Hey, if it's going to happen somewhere, why not happen at South Carolina? But you got to understand something. Think about last year. You know, I agree with you if you tell me South Carolina overachieved last year. They did, okay? Here's the problem, and it shows you how wide a gap you got to make up. South Carolina, in an overachievement year last year, they played 3 of these teams. They played Texas A&M. They played Georgia. They played Bama, whoever. Listen, they lost 3 of these games by 27 or more last year. So there were 3 of these opponents that were already on their schedule last year, and they got housed by them. Clemson was the other one. They got housed by them. So there's a lot that has to be made up here. So we're looking to pull 2 upsets. They're on the road at Arkansas. They are on the road at Clemson. I've got to figure, you're trying to start early. You get Arkansas in week 2. If you pull that off and you come home and you got Georgia, maybe you have the Hornets' nest there and you catch Georgia early in the season, young defense. Listen, yeah, there's certainly a path for it. I think it's unlikely, but here's what I want to know. Are you losing games by 3 or 4 touchdowns again? Or do you have a situation where, we're losing to Georgia 30-20? We're losing to Texas A&M 27-26. That's a different world than what we saw last year. So I'm going to call that an 8. It is very bold, though not impossible. Next up, this would be tough to stomach there on the East Coast. ACC left out of the playoff again this year. Big Ten's going to have 1 team. Big 12 will have 1 team. SEC has 2 teams. Okay, Jared, here's what I'm going to do. That was from Jared. Going to ignore that second part. I'm just going to focus on the ACC part because that would become way too cluttered here. I called this a 6 because it's really on Clemson. Until further notice, this is a Clemson thing. If Clemson makes it, then you're wrong. And if they make it, you're right. And if they miss out, you're wrong. The ACC getting left out, it's only happened once since the playoffs inception, which was in 2014. And that was last year. So I guess you're looking to make it a streak here. I think it's still Clemson or bust in 22. If they're not, you're probably looking at Miami. You're looking at a long shot there. But the reason why I made this a 6 is I think there's some boldness to it, but there are 2 schools of thought. Either Clemson just makes it and it's a moot point, or they miss out. And then the second part of that is if Clemson misses out, you have to make sure no one knocked them out to the point where that team in and of themselves were qualifiers for the playoffs. So you need like a 1 or a 2 loss team probably in the ACC title game, or maybe Clemson just drops a couple of games early so their playoff resume is thrown in the wood chipper, but they're still good enough to just beat a bunch of battered teams en route to an ACC championship. I think the ACC is going to find a way to be included this year. At least I'd lean slightly that way. But I do still call this one a 6 on the boldness scale. Last one. Well, second to last one. How about this? Someone told me today we don't talk enough G5. Well, we'll stick this in your pipe and smoke it. Tristan said, Butch Jones, remember Coach Jones? He has a complete turnaround in year 2. He leads the Arkansas State Red Wolves to 6+ wins and a bowl win. Since I don't think you have this information on the tip of your tongue, allow me to remind you Arkansas State went 2-10 last year in Butch Jones's first year, but they were 1-5 in 1-possession games. So you could sell me that maybe they just have that little bit of turnaround that equates to a monumental turnaround in the 1-possession loss category. Here's kind of the problem. They also lost by 18 points or more, I think 5 times. So it wasn't Nebraska, in other words. They weren't just losing a bunch of close games. Now, they had the top recruiting class in the Sun Belt. They had a pretty good portal haul. I think they're still probably a year away from making that bowl leap. So I'm going to call this one an 8. They were 2-10. I mean, if they get to 4 or 5 wins even this year, that's really good progress. Let's give them one more year. So their over-under win total right now is 5. That's a good year. Let's try and push it up there. This is not my advice to them, but let's try and push it up there. And then next year, that'd be the year that I expect them to move. Then there was one more that I just wanted to hit on right quick because I laughed at this, but I got the sense that the person who sent it was not laughing. John said, Arch Manning, here's his bold prediction. Arch Manning is ranked as high as he is to distract the public from the behavior of the federal government, big food, and the military-industrial complex. I could give you my response to this. I truly could. But why would I do that when I can just go over here to my research packet that Stats and Info, aka producer Jesse, provided me, and I'll read you what Jesse's notes said. Yes, our composite rankings, set by getting an average from a number of other companies, are all in cahoots. Come on, buddy. This is Jesse's notes to me. Come on, buddy. Arch is a dog. He has family mentors who have won 4 Super Bowls and comes from a lineage of great quarterbacks. He has the requisite height, mental aptitude, and athleticism to be the number 1 guy. Jesse's boldness scale, 20 out of 10. So there you have it. From producer Jesse's fingers through my lips to you, there is no government conspiracy working through the recruiting industry with Arch Manning. Though I would say, if the government were in cahoots with the recruiting industry, wouldn't the Mannings find a way to be involved somehow? Leave it at that.